Hello again. In the previous session, we looked at the general visualizations of our dashboard application. Today, we'll look at the state and value visualizations. Let's pick the first one. If we have a visualization that can be linked with data, we have our green icon here inside the component. And if we click it, we can see what data can be linked with. So look very carefully at the data section and see that some items are highlighted after clicking the button. We'll go over the different items and link them one by one to this visualization, but we will skip the feeds and the queries for now because they belong to a more advanced session. So let's start with an element. If I expand the element data source, we have our list of elements, of course. If we pick one, we can drag it in here. And we can see we have our element together with its state and protocol visualized inside this component. Let's take a second component to link it to another data source. Let's take a parameter now from our server, first page, performance page, and here we have our parameter. So in here we see the state, the name, and the value of our parameter. Let's move on and try to link something else. Collapse it, so click the green button again to see what can be used. We'll skip the queries. Let's take a redundancy group, for example. If we link that, we can see that we have the state and the name of our redundancy group. Take another one. Again, click the button to see what's left here. We have the services left, for example. If we click service and link it, same thing as a redundancy group, we have the state and the name. And then one last option is linking it to a view. So we have our view tree here. Let's take that view. And also here we see that we have the state and the name of our view inside this component. To illustrate the options of the state visualization, I have added 3 more examples here, all linked to parameters. If we select the first one, we can see that we can show it in a small, large, or auto-sized scaling. Regarding the state, we can visualize that in a LED, but also in a line. We can color the text with the state color or the background, or we can apply no coloring at all. If you choose to color the background, you can automatically adjust the foreground color to something that matches the background color, so a light color or a dark color, depending on the background. For the layout flow, we will illustrate this option with another example later on, an example where we will link multiple parameters to one state component. And here at the bottom, we have some options to what information we want to display. So by default, when you link to a parameter, it will show the name and the value, but we can extend that with both the element name and also with the index. Therefore, I have an example here of a table parameter. So we can see that we display here the parameter CPU from our server main, and the index is DataMiner.0. If you look at the settings, we have an interesting setting here regarding dynamic units. So by default, in our dashboard setting, we also have the option here, default enabled. So the dynamic units will automatically be enabled by default. And we have an option to override that at component level. So over here, we can override the value from the dashboard, and we can choose to apply it or not apply it. So if we disable the option, we can see our value is displayed in the units defined in the driver. So memory usage in the driver has the unit kilobyte, and if we apply the dynamic units, we see that the unit it changes to megabyte, and also the value adapts, of course. Grouping will also be illustrated later on with another example. To illustrate the layout flow, I have linked here in this state component a full column of my task manager. So in here I see the CPU usage for all my processes, basically. In the row layout, we see that we have multiple rows of processes. So this is the first process in my table, here the second one, the third, fourth, and then the fifth here in the second row. If I resize my component, then we see we get less or more items next to each other. For the column layout, it's the other way around. So the first item here in the top left is the same, but then the second one goes below it, and we basically have multiple columns with extra items here. If I resize here vertically, we see that more items are listed on top of each other. In the column layout, we have a horizontal scroll bar for the remaining items. In the row layout, it's a vertical scroll bar. To illustrate the grouping concept in the state visualization, let's try to link it with two table parameters. So take CPU and memory usage. Take two indices from that table. Let's take that one and that one as a filter. And then take from two different elements and also add that to the filter. So you see the different parameters are listed over here. Let's visualize everything that we can so that we can clearly see how the grouping works. To configure the grouping, we go to settings. At the bottom here we have the group by. So by default there is no grouping, and you see that everything, all the parameters are listed in one list. You can group by parameter, and then you see we have the first column with the CPU parameter, and then the second one with memory usage. Same thing goes with grouping by element, and you have to do elements as columns, and also the same for grouping by table index. Grouping all together does not have any effect for this state visualization, and does the same as no grouping. So far so good for the basic state visualization, but we have other state visualizations in there as well. The ring is also a nice one. It's very similar to the basic state visualization. It has the more or less the same data sources it can display. So let's take, for example, an element to show you how it looks. We have a ring with the state, and inside we have the same data, so the name of the element and the protocol. The options or most of the options are obsolete in this version, but those will be aligned with the basic state visualization options. Next to that, we also have the gauge component. Let's make this a bit bigger. Okay, if we see to what we can link it, it's limited to parameters. So let's have a look there. Let's take our server again. And we see it's not only linked to parameters, but it's linked to specific parameters. So basically only the range parameters can be used at this moment for this component. And if we link it, we can see how this looks like. So we see the range of the parameter, we see the value inside, and we see name of the parameter. Finally, we have the last state visualization in here, and that's the state timeline. Let's bring it in. We click the icon again to see to what data we can link it to. We see we can link it to elements, parameters, and services. Let's try to link it with an element. And then we see that we have an overview of the last 24 hours of all the state changes of this element. So if we hover over the different state changes, we see the time spans that are linked to that. We bring in another one, and then link it, for example, to parameter. Let's take our famous total processor load again. Okay, here we see a similar overview, but then limited to this parameter. And then finally, for a service, again the same thing, of course. So let's pick a service, one for example. And again, same thing, just the timeline, last 24 hours of this service.